So let me share my screen. Okay, so what we wanted to talk about today is a couple of things from the book of Daniel. So in Daniel chapter 3, we read about the three saintly youth, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And those youth in chapter 3, that's the story when Nebuchadnezzar, the king, he made a big statue and wanted everyone to worship that statue. And everyone had to worship, otherwise they would be killed, except the three youth. They said, we're not going to worship. So look here in what they said to the king. It's when he called them and said, why don't you want to worship the statue that I made? Everybody else is. And he threatened them. He said, if you don't, you will be thrown into the fiery furnace. And they told him in verse 17, if that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. You know that those three youth were actually carried over from Jerusalem as captives, and then they showed, wisdom, and they showed honesty, and they were promoted in their position. And then after that, in this story, they are speaking to the king Nebuchadnezzar. They used to call King Nebuchadnezzar King of Kings. He was one of the very strong and powerful kings in the history. And it wasn't really easy for anyone to talk to him like this. In fact, I don't think many people actually were able to talk to him in this way. Otherwise, they would lose their lives. But look at what they said. They said, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us. Our God is able. That's their faith. But then they also did not put a condition for God. They didn't tell God, we trusted you, you have to save us. They said, if he's not going to save us, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods. Anyway, we're not going to serve your gods. What happened at the end of the story? You know that they were thrown in the fiery furnace, and God sent his angel and protected them, and nothing really happened to them, although the furnace was so hot it killed the people who actually threw them inside the furnace. But then in the end of the story, it says, therefore I make a decree. That's Nebuchadnezzar after he saw what happened. He said, therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. This is the first thing we want to talk about, is that because of their honesty and because of their faithfulness to God, although it was something very difficult, and although it was really almost impossible to talk to the king like that, or to not listen to him, but because of that, they witnessed to God. They witnessed to God in such a great way that the King of Kings at that time, Nebuchadnezzar, said, there is no other God who can deliver like this. Notice that, of course, there were a lot of other Jewish people, a lot of other people from all nationalities present in Babylon at the time. And they all worshipped, and we didn't hear anything about them, because the story ended at that they worshipped and they listened, and maybe they betrayed their God. But these three saintly youth did not. And because they did not, because they stayed faithful to God, they witnessed in front of everyone to God, and they witnessed even to the king. Even the king that didn't, or took it on himself, that they don't want to listen to me. Like, who are you not to listen to me? But he, although he was so in a situation that was so powerful, and he was proud of himself, that's why he wanted everyone to worship the statue that he built. But then he humbled himself at the end, saying, there is no other God who can deliver like this. That's the first story. The second story, also in the book of Daniel. In Daniel chapter 6, we hear about, that's actually in the kingdom of or in the reign of King Darius, in the kingdom of the the Persians after the Babylonians. So in this story, we know that King Darius loved Daniel and he promoted him to be pretty much like almost the second man after him because he trusted him so much. So the governors were jealous and they envied him, and they sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom. So they sought to find a mistake, something wrong that he did. Maybe he took a bribe, maybe he was not honest in his work, something like that. But they could not find no charge or fault because he was faithful. Notice here, Daniel was faithful to the king, to King Darius. Nor was there any error or fault found in him. They couldn't find anything because he was so faithful in his work. So this is the first thing, keep it in mind. He was so faithful in his work, and plus, of course, he was very gifted. He was known to be very wise, so the king trusted him a lot. Now, when Daniel knew, you know the story, of course, that those governors, they went to the king, King Darius, and said to him, how about, like, they kind of flattered him. They said that, how about you issue a decree saying that for a whole month, no one should ask anyone from any god or any person other than you. And the king, fell into that trap, and he signed the decree, and he didn't know, of course, because he loved Daniel. Now, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home, and in his upper room, with his windows open toward Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, and as was his custom since early days. So we see Daniel being very faithful to his king, very faithful to the work that he did, but also extremely faithful to God. Because if you notice here, why was it, if Daniel heard what the king issued, the decree that the king issued, why didn't he just close his window? He could still pray, he could still practice whatever he wants, but in secret without anyone seeing him. But no, he said, or the Bible says, as was his custom since early days. That means that his custom since early days, since he was young, was that every day he has to open his window and he has to pray to God. And even though this may actually cost him his life, but it didn't matter to him. So you can see Daniel being extremely faithful to God and extremely faithful to his work. Then we know what happened, that he was thrown into the lion's den, and then the king tried to save him, but he couldn't. And then, of course, he came very early the next day at dawn and found him still alive. And he was really glad that Daniel did not die. And he took the people that were jealous of him and caused this to happen and threw them in the lion's den, and they died. So at the end of the chapter, we hear this: I make a decree, that's King Darius, that in every dominion of my kingdom, men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. So notice here that these people may not have known the God of Daniel before, but now they do. Just like King Nebuchadnezzar had the better idea of the God of Israel because of the 3 saintly youth. And then King Darius went on saying in the decree, for he is the living God. That God of Daniel, he is the living God, and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and he rescues. You remember what King Nebuchadnezzar said to the 3 saintly youth? There is no other God who can deliver like this. King Darius said the same thing. He said, this God of Daniel, he delivers and he rescues. Because he never saw any God that can save someone from a lion's den. And he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. Who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions? So you can see here that through Daniel and the 3 youths, faithfulness to God, faithfulness in obeying God, faithfulness in being steadfast in their faith, faithfulness in obeying the commandments of God and living honestly with other people. They witnessed in a very beautiful way to God. And because of them, God was exalted and was glorified even by the people who never heard about him. So this is what we want to think about today during our quiet time. That's what I need to do in order to witness to God. I don't need to go out and preach or like give a sermon, but
this is Daniel, book of Daniel, chapter 6.
Yes, Daniel 3. Daniel 3 is the first story, and Daniel 6 is the second story.
Oh, two stories. Oh.
So we have this witness because of their faithfulness, because they obeyed the commandment of God. And this is the most beautiful way I can witness to God, is to listen to his commandments, is to obey his word. People are not going to see my knowledge of the Bible, or people are not going to see like anything theological that I studied or anything of that sort, but people will see my honesty, and people will see how kind I am to them, and how caring I am to them, and so on. So these things, these characteristics of a Christian person is what we really can use to witness to God. نقول التأمل بسرعة بالعربي. التأمل ده يعني قصتين، قصة من دانيال 3 وقصة من دانيال 6. فالقصة من دانيال 3 بتقول إن ملك نبوخذ نصر، وعارفين ملك نبوخذ نصر ده كان ملك بابل، وكان ملك يعني قاسي جدا وقوي جدا ومحدش يقدر يقف قدامه. فالملك ده جه في وقت وعمل تمثال كبير، وقال لكل الناس إن هم يسجدوا للتمثال، لما يسمعوا صوت الموسيقى لازم يسجدوا للتمثال. فكل الناس سجدت للتمثال ما عدا الثلاث فتية شدرخ وميشخ وأبدناغو. فالثلاث فتية دول في ناس شافوهم وواشوا بيهم عند الملك. فالملك يعني ناداهم وقال لهم انتوا ليه مش بتسجدوا للتمثال؟ فراحوا جاوبوه وقالوا له لا داعي الا ان نجيبك عن هذا الشأن. بصوا القوة بتاعتهم، ان هم بيكلموا واحد كانوا بيسموه ساعتها ملك الملوك، محدش يقدر يقف قدامه. لكن قالوا له ان احنا يمكن في الترجمة اللي احنا عارفينها لا يلزمنا ان نجيبك عن هذا الامر، يعني احنا مش محتاجين ان احنا نرد عليك، لأن إلهنا الذي نعبده قادر أن ينجينا من أتون النار. طبعا خلوا بالكم من الكلمة دي، إلهنا قادر أن ينجينا. ده إيمانهم، إن لو ربنا عايز ينجيهم هينجيهم. ويمكن الإيمان ده هم توارثوه من القصص اللي سمعوها بقى عن موسى، عن شق البحر، عن ضربات اللي في مصر، عن كل المعجزات اللي ربنا عملها معاهم. فهم كان عندهم إيمان إن لو ربنا عايز هينجينا. وأن ينقذنا من يدك أيها الملك. وحتى إن لم ينقذنا، خلوا بالكم الحتة دي جميلة قوي في الثلاث فتية، إن هم قالوا إيه، حتى يعني ما اشترطوش على ربنا، ما قالوش لربنا إحنا هنطيعك بس أنت لازم تنقذنا من أتون النار. لا، قالوا إحنا عارفين إن ربنا يقدر ينقذنا، بس لو ربنا ما أنقذناش فاعلم يقينا أيها الملك أننا لا نعبد آلهتك. يعني كده كده مش هنغلط، مش هنخون ربنا. وعارفين بقية القصة إن هم يعني اترموا في أتون النار، وربنا بعت الملاك بتاعه أنقذهم، والنار ما أذتهمش. حتى بيقولوا حتى ثيابهم لم يعني ما جاتش فيها ريحة النار.
أبونا
نعم.
هو الملاك اللي جه ولا ربنا ظهر وسطهم بقى؟
هو الإنجيل بيقول ملاك، بس هو يعني ده من
بابن الآلهة، مش قالوا كده؟
هو يعني الإنجيل سيل بيقول ملاك، بس هو يعني في كذا موقف في العهد القديم ان كلمة ملاك الرب، ان كلمة ملاك الرب بتبقى كناية عن ربنا نفسه. يعني في كذا ظهور كده، زي اللي ظهر ليشوع ويشوع سجد له، زي اللي ظهر لأبو جدعون وبرضه أمه سجدوا له، وهكذا. فهو كان فعلا من ظهورات
الله ليهم.
لهذا قد صدر مني أمر. فبعد ما طلعوا من أتون النار، فراح نبوخذ نصر قال لهم أنا ما شفتش حاجة زي كده قبل كده. برغم ان نبوخذ نصر ده كان ملك متكبر جدا. يعني لما تقروا القصة اللي بعد كده في إصحاح 4 ان هو ربنا يعني عاقبه على كبريائه وخلاه 7 سنين يعني شالوا بره الملك، وبقى بيقول عايش زي الحيوانات، وبعد كده رجعوا تاني لما اتضع قدام ربنا. لكن هنا بيقول برغم الكبرياء بتاعه اتضع هو قدام ربنا في القصة دي، يعني he was humbled by it، لأن بيقول إن أنا ما شفتش حد يقدر ينجي زي كده. فبيقول لهذا قد صدر مني أمر أن أي شعب أو أمة أو قوم من أي لسان يذمون إله شدرخ وميشخ وأبدناغو يمزقون إربا وتصبح بيوتهم أنقاضا، إذ ليس هناك إله آخر يقدر أن ينجي مثله. يعني شوفوا الأمانة بتاعت الثلاث فتية، يعني بسببها إيه اللي حصل؟ حصل شهادة لربنا من ملك ما كانش يعرف ربنا، وشهادة لربنا قدام كل الناس بسبب الأمانة بتاعته. نفس الموضوع برضو في دانيال 6، لما دانيال كان بيخدم الملك داريوس، يعني والملك داريوس ده كان ملك فارس بعد مملكة البابليين جت مملكة الفرس مادي وفارس. وكان دانيال في كل مملكة بسبب أمانته كان الملوك بيحبوه قوي وكانوا بيدوله منصب عالي. فملك داريوس ده كان مدي دانيال منصب عالي جدا، فالناس ابتدوا يغيروا منه. فاللي هم الحكام اللي حواليه اللي هم كانوا يعني عايزين ياخدوا المنصب بتاعه، اتفقوا ان هم يروحوا الملك داريوس ويقولوا له احنا يعني زي نوع من التملق يعني للملك، ان هو احنا مش هنطلب، يعني عايزينك تصدر امر ان محدش يطلب من اي انسان او اله لمدة 30 يوم الا منك انت، واي حد يطلب حاجة من اله او انسان يموت، يترمي في جب الاسود. ففعلا الملك سمع كلامهم وكتب ال يعني الامر ده. وبيقول فلما بلغ دانيال امر توقيع الوثيقه مضى الى بيته وصعد الى علياته ذات القوى المفتوحه باتجاه اورشليم، وجثى على ركبتيه 3 مرات في اليوم وصلى وحمد الهه كمألوف عادته او كحسب عادته من قبل. فنقول ان دانيال يعني كان ممكن بسهوله، يعني ممكن اي حد في مكان دانيال مش لازم ان هو يخون ربنا، ممكن ان هو يصلي، بس ممكن ان هو يصلي في السر. بس هو دانيال كان متعود يصلي وهو
فاتح
الشباك
الشباك.
بتاعه مفتوح ناحيه اورشليم. وبيقول كعادته، ايه العادته، ايه اللي كان مألوف ليه، ان هو يصلي 3 مرات في اليوم. فدانيال ده كان انسان امين جدا لربنا، وكان امين جدا في شغله. يعني الجزء اللي قريناه في الانجليش بس يمكن نسيت احطه هنا، ان هو بيقولوا ان الوزراء دول والحكام حبوا ان هم يعني يوقعوا دانيال، يشتكوا عليه، لقوا حاجه يشتكوا عليه. فبيقولوا ان هم ما لقوش ولا حاجه يشتكوا عليه فيها. بيقولوا حتى في الترجمه، يعني ترجمه من الترجمات، بيقولوا ما لقوش ولا حاجه غلطه ولا هفوه، يعني ولا هفوه ان هو بيعمل اي حاجه غلط في شغله. فقالوا ما فيش غير ان احنا نوقعه من ناحيه الديانه بتاعته. فعملوا القصه دي. والملك داريوس زعل قوي لما جوا له بقى وقالوا له ان دانيال يعني بيعبد اله تاني وهو كسر الامر بتاعك، فانت لازم ان انت تموته. ف فراح الملك حب ان هو ينجيه باي شكل، ما عرفش. والوزراء يعني ذي بوشد ان هو قالوا له انت لو غيرت حاجه يبقى انت كده بتغير الشريعه بتاعت فارس، واي حاجه تتمضي منك ما ينفعش انها تتغير. فبيقول ان بعد ما دانيال اترمى في جب الاسود، وبعدين بيقولوا حتى الملك من كتر حزنه ليلتها يعني ما عرفش ينام طول الليل، وصحي في الفجر، او يعني راح في الفجر جب الاسود عشان يتشك يعني على دانيال، فلقاه حي. فبيقول ان هو فرح قوي وكاد الناس اللي اشتكوا دانيال دول وترحم في جب الاسود ومات. فبيقول بعد كده عمل ايه؟ ثم بعث الملك داريوس الى كل الشعوب والامم من كل لسان من الساكنين في مملكته برسائل قائله ليكثر سلامكم، قد صدر مني امر ان يرتعد كل من يقيم في تخوم مملكتي ويخاف امام اله دانيال. يعني خلوا بالكم الملك ده ملك فارس، وفارس في الوقت ده كانت هي الكينجدم اللي سايده، يعني المملكه اللي سايده في العالم. فهو بيبعت لكل الناس اللي في المملكه بتوعه بيقول لهم ان كل الناس تخاف من اله دانيال. شوفوا الشهاده قويه ازاي، عشان انسان واحد امين، لانه هو الاله الحي القيوم الى الابد، لا يزول له ملكوت وسلطانه الى المنتهى، هو ينجي وينقذ ويجري الايات والعجائب في السماوات والارض، وهو الذي خلص دانيال من انياب الاسود. ايه اللي خلى نبوخذ نصر يبعت مكتوب لكل الناس، وداريوس يبعت مكتوب لكل الناس، والاثنين يقولوا للناس كل الناس لازم تحترم اله دانيال، وكل الناس لازم تحترم اله الثلاث فتية، لان الاثنين اتفقوا على حاجه، ان لا اله يقدر ان ينجي هكذا سواء من اتون النار او من جب الاسود. ايه السبب في كده؟ هل السبب في كده إن هم راحوا عملوا وعظة مثلا عن الإله بتاعهم، أو هل إن هم كانوا مثلا عندهم معلومات ويعني بيكلموا الناس عنها، ولا السبب في كده إن هم عاشوا زي ما ربنا عايز؟ إحنا برضو مطلوب مننا نفس الحاجة، إن أنا لو عايش زي ما ربنا عايز هشهد لربنا شهادة جميلة أوي. لكن لو أنا يعني بتكلم كتير بس مش عايش، يبقى مش هشهد لربنا عن حاجة خالص. فيا ريت إن إحنا نتأمل في الموضوع ده كده في وقت الخلوة بتاعنا النهاردة، إزاي إن دانيال والثلاث فتية بأمانتهم وطاعتهم لربنا حتى في الوقت الخطر، وحتى في الوقت اللي يعني كان فيه تهديد لحياتهم، يعني شهدوا أحسن من أي حد تاني كان ممكن يشهد عن ربنا في البلاد الغريبة دي في الوقت ده. فناخد خلوة دلوقتي وبعدين عندنا البايبل ستادي العربي الساعة 8 النهاردة.